Morning, Bills Mafia. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Today's name is Osiris Torrance, however, because guess what all? It's draft season. And it has been a whirlwind of discussion and discourse and speculation, whatever you'd like to call it. It has been nonstop turbulence within this fan base and literally the entire NFL. But happy to say that we are finally here at the draft. The past 2 days have been very exciting. Today, I'm going to say, not tomorrow. Today is day 3, which is also going to be very exciting because we have 4 rounds to cover and a lot more Bills picks to come our way. But we already have some interesting picks so far. So before we get into today's discussion, I'd like to introduce my guest today. He is from the Built in Buffalo Network, and he agreed to come on, which I appreciate his time. So, Ben, why don't you give the floor your introduction?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure being on here, working with all you Cover One guys. It's really awesome. But yeah, just recently joined Built in Buffalo. Obviously huge Bills and Sabres, just Buffalo sports fan. But yeah, I'm a multitude of sports guy. I mean, basketball, baseball, football, anything like that. But yeah, as I was telling you before the game, I walked to every single Bills game, or before the show, I walked to every single Bills game. 10-minute walk for me, and can see it right from my house, and concerts, games, anything. If you're at my house, you're usually hearing stuff go off and everything. So excited to be on, excited to talk some Bills football, excited for day 3. And yeah, thanks for having me.
For sure, man. And we have a couple chats already. And Connor loves third round special teamers. He's excited for third round special teamers, I see. So that's great. For all of you joining, I know we're a little bit early this week with draft coverage for Cover One. Wanted to start a little bit more early just to give us time for everyone to get set up and then nothing interferes or intertwines on time slots. Also, do want to apologize. So I don't know if any of you were tuning in on Thursday, but my microphone wire just snapped for no reason. So I'm running off an iPhone microphone right now. We got to make it work. So if I sound super reverby, super loud, whatever, that is the reason. I do apologize. I'm going to have it fixed for next week. But yeah, Ben, it was certainly an interesting first couple of picks. I mean, I had done a few mock drafts on this show. I'm sure you've done mocks in your own time or have been reading around on it. And this is really not the direction I thought they were going to go, but I'm not disappointed at the same time with some of the first picks. I really thought that given what we saw with some of their top 30 visits, given what we saw with how they seemed to trend and some of the charts that showed how they pick based on their top 30 visits, that they were going to essentially pick receiver or make the move to get a receiver because the board didn't fall their way. Now you get to the 20s and all of those receiving prospects are poached. And now you're asking yourself, what do you do? So in my mind, I'm thinking they're going to trade back, potentially go into the second round, try to accumulate some capital, go from 6 to 8, maybe 6 to 7, however the jump would be, and just figure it out there. But no, they decided that they had a guy in mind. They move up a couple of picks for him, and they go and they get Dalton Kincaid from Utah. And he was interesting. And I got to say at first that I wasn't too ecstatic about this pick. And it wasn't for the reason that I didn't think he was a good prospect. It was for the reason that I didn't understand why they were going for a tight end. But this is the beauty of the draft. This is the beauty of football, is that just because you have a position doesn't mean that you are in the box of what people think that position is. There's versatility there. And that's exactly what Dalton Kincaid is. So in college, he primarily lined up in the slot, especially this past year. The known thing about him is that he's absolutely sure-handed. He had 2 drops on 93 targets in 2022, which is absolutely insane. He had 893 yards, 8 touchdowns. And one of the knocks on him is his blocking ability. But anyone I've talked to, especially the guys in the Cover One chat, have said that blocking is not an issue for him. He's a willing blocker. He'll move downfield, and that's something that he could only improve upon as he gets ready for his pro career. So, Ben, I'm going to ask you, what were your thoughts on this pick? And was it surprising? And also, how do you think he could be used in the Bills' offense?
Yeah, it was definitely a shock. I mean, when you saw them trade up to 25, you thought, okay, what are they thinking here? Who are they going after? I thought maybe Nolan Smith from Georgia, because obviously he fell and he went to the Eagles, but I thought maybe they'll go with him because obviously Bond's getting older. He's not going to probably start the season in week 1. But yeah, then they go Kincaid. My first reaction was a little bit stunned. I think I was a little speechless there for a minute. But after thinking about it and seeing what their thought process was, I like the pick. I really do. You're getting a guy that can be kind of a safety valve underneath for Allen, kind of in that Beasley role. I know people have been hesitant to really say he's a Beasley type guy because he's obviously way bigger and a tight end. But you'll see him a lot in the slot, right? He's lined up about 50% of the time in college in the slot, and you'll see him be able to get mismatches. And so I really like it. I like the pick. Like you said, sure-handed guy in the Bills. If there's one thing they've struggled with, it's guys catching the football. So I like the pick. Again, he'll have to beef up a little bit probably, but I like the pick. I think it's a good one. And, I think it will open up the field a lot. Josh Allen, I think, will end up I think Kincaid could be his best friend. And at the end of the day, when you have Knox and Kincaid, I think that could be a very good duo. You can move them around a lot, but have them both swap in the slot, in line, do a lot of different things with them. But, I mean, you had about 80 targets leave the Bills this offseason. And when you look at it, is that going to all go to Kincaid? No, it's not all going to go to him. But you could see, some targets from Gabe go over to Kincaid too. You could see maybe 50% of those targets, or 50 out of those 80 targets go to Kincaid. So I think it was a good move. I think people were just shocked and tight end wasn't on the radar. And also, I think the other thing is I don't think a lot of people thought even Kincaid would be there by the time the Bills were picking. So I like the pick. Definitely a little bit shocking. But they got to get him involved. That's the other thing. And obviously we haven't, as the team hasn't really gotten tight ends involved a lot in the past. But it seems like they've been looking for a second tight end for a while. They tried it with OJ Howard. They tried it with Quentin Morris, and it just hasn't really worked out. Now they go get their guy, and I think it will really open up the offense a lot.
I agree with that. And that's a great point because you've seen it in years past. They were trying to find that complement for Knox, right? So Jacob Hollister was one. He gets signed to a 1-year deal. And a lot of people think that they're going to start running 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets. You're going to see Hollister and Knox. That doesn't work out. And it, wasn't really a love loss. Hollister didn't really scorch earth or anything like that. But it wasn't just the talent level that we wanted for those 2 tight end sets, right? And then you talk about OJ Howard, and I was pretty excited for that. I thought he underwhelmed in Tampa, but I saw the potential of him being a 2 in this offense where you had Knox as your main tight end and OJ's really just your blocker, but also could come in for some receptions, maybe some mismatches in the middle of the field. And that doesn't work out. And he ends up getting cut before the season starts. So you saw, and it was kind of under the radar because we all knew that they were doing it, but we never really felt that it was the biggest need that they had, right? Like you see them going for this 2 tight end set, trying to find that complement. It doesn't end up working out either year. So we kind of just forget about it. And we go into the season with Knox and Morris. And we've kind of pitched the idea of maybe they should run more 2 tight end sets. Maybe that'd be a fun wrinkle that Dorsey could play with in this offense. But then they don't do it. And they have occasional, formations where they do line up that way and whatever. But they were one of the lowest in the league at running 12 personnel. So it was like, okay, maybe they won't do it. Maybe they're just going to go find another receiver. We're going to go back to how we did it with Dable and have our new Beasley, someone who is that slot guy that we can depend on, which for me, and I think a lot of people were thinking that was going to be Josh Downs, or maybe if you had Addison fall down, or maybe later on if you want to take Jaden Reed and do something where you had this hybrid receiver, because we know they love hybrid receivers, right? Shakir is a boundary guy, but also an inside guy. Diggs can play both as well. So you're thinking maybe they do the hybrid receiver or a true slot guy that takes over that role. And then here you go. You have your safety valve for Josh. Maybe he has to cook and develop, or maybe he works right away. But again, the board doesn't fall that way this year. So we're thinking all the receivers are gone. And I'm sitting there thinking maybe they'll settle for edge, which again, if you've watched this show and you've seen me talk in the past, I support a pick for edge because I think it is a sneaky need. But then they trade up and they take Kincaid. And you realize that is the answer. And it's the answer not only of his shorthandedness, the fact that he is someone that, that second tight end that could line up with Knox. He is debatably the best tight end prospect in this draft by a lot of people who have speculated it. But it's more to say that he is that Beasley replacement too. Now, I want to stress, I don't think he's Cole Beasley, right? I'm not saying Beasley replacement is into the same player. Cole Beasley was 5'9", way shorter. He was much more of a shifty, true slot guy. Kincaid is a big body, but Kincaid moves so fluidly. He has sneaky athleticism. And Eric made a great point in Spaces yesterday where we talked about our 2 tight end sets and how we're probably going to run a lot more of them this year. And he was saying how Knox is a guy who can go forward, kind of go vertical, go up and get it down the field. But when he tries to come across, he's not necessarily someone who, has that quick burst, that quick jolt that can get himself open. Kincaid can do that. Kincaid is a field stretcher. He can go side to side, and that's huge because it felt like this offense was lacking that. And last year, you saw that kind of slot receiver by committee where you had Crowder and you had Isaiah McKenzie and you had the rookie of Shakir who, had some failed blocks, had some duds when he snapped. And obviously when you're a rookie in a McDermott coach team, you only get so much leeway. So for me, having Kincaid addresses that need immediately. It's not going to so much take away from Knox. I think they're going to be on the field together a lot to cause mismatches for defenses. But also, you're almost getting like 2 axes where you have Knox going up top and you have Kincaid going across. Allen's going to have just a lot to work with, new reads, and basically his safety valve, his emergency third down option, which I felt like was so needed for this offense last season. Because, Ben, you saw so many times it was 1st and 10, then 2nd and 9, then 3rd and 8, or you have a penalty and it's 3rd and 10. And it just felt like too much during the year. This team was pinned back behind their ears, weren't able to get that first down because they were put in terrible deficits where they would end up having to compensate by Allen making that heroic play or Allen doing too much and causing a turnover or just the play failing in general because it's not sustainable and a defense can sit on your pass. So Kincaid seems to address that across need. I want to ask you, though, because this has been an interesting kind of discussion here, but Kincaid obviously getting taken at 25, that you talked about it before, usage. What is your prediction or what do you think Dorsey will do with him in his first year? Do you think that he's going to get him involved immediately and have him be perpetual, consistent tight end option, or do you think you see it as nursing him into the offense? We don't see him right away.
I think in McDermott fashion and kind of just the Bills fashion, I think you'll see at least early on, you won't see him maybe too much. I mean, maybe probably about 50% in the first couple of games snap wise. But I think as the season goes on, you'll start seeing him implemented more and more because, I mean, like you said, it's a big jump from college to the NFL for these guys. And they're going to have a lot to learn. I mean, it's a whole new playbook and everything. So I think they'll ease them in. They'll definitely want to ease them in at least the first 3 games. But I also wouldn't be shocked, if they maybe heard the talk a little bit saying, we haven't played our rookies enough. We really want to see them out there. So I think that you could see them a little bit more than a usual rookie for the Bills. But like I said, I think you'll see him eased in, let him learn from Knox a little bit, let Knox teach him a few things the NFL-wise, work with Allen, get that connection before really just throwing him out there. But I'm excited to see him because, like you said, he's got a little bit of Beasley in him with obviously a lot more size. But he's also, and I don't want to, it's going to sound crazy, but he's obviously got the Travis Kelce-esque type play. I want to reiterate. I'm not
comparison, Ben.
Yeah, I want to reiterate. I'm not saying he's going to be Travis Kelce, but when you watch him play, like sometimes you get that feeling like, oh, he kind of moves that way, or he's got the surefire hands, kind of like Kelce. But yeah, I think he can be a guy that's really utilized in a lot of different ways. You can see him in the slot, you can see him in line, you can see him and Knox swapping a lot of times. But I think they'll ease him in. I don't think they'll rush him. I mean, you see it with every rookie every year. I mean, the only one really last year where you didn't see eased in was Christian Benford, and that was actually a late round pick, which was kind of shocking to a lot of people. But a lot of these guys, you see them eased in, and I know that a lot of people will get very, very upset about that. But it's the McDermott way of saying, we get it, you're a rookie, we don't want to throw you into the light right away, and if you crumble right away, we'll bring you back. Like we saw with James Cook, obviously fumbled on his first carry. They brought him back a little bit. So it's going to be a question because I feel like this is a pick that it's a different pick than the Bills usually go after, right? It's a different. It wasn't a top 30 visit. There wasn't much talk about Kincaid and the Bills really too much. So it could be a little bit different just because of the fact that it's a different pick than Beane and company usually go after.
Mhm.
So they could implement them a lot faster. But I would still say, yeah, first 3 games, maybe a little ease in a little bit. But I do think one thing I will say with the 2 tight ends, I think you could see a lot of tight end screens coming. I know you've obviously seen it with even Gilliam at fullback. They did a little fullback screen last year. So I think you could see a little dump offs to him, just get the ball in his hands, get the defense thinking, get him up front, and then beat him deep, because you obviously got a lot of guys that can go deep on him. So
Mhm.
I think the offense is going to change, and that was one thing that a lot of people were after this pick saying it's got to change now. It's got to change. You got to get these guys involved, and I think you will see a change, right? I think you won't see as many deep ball plays, especially if you look at last year, beginning of the year. Why was the offense rolling so well? Because they weren't going deep all the time. They were really just getting the ball out of Allen's hands. And as the season went on, I think you saw that kind of go down a little bit, and it was a lot more, let's see Allen make his wonder plays and make everybody go, whoa, 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 oh my gosh, look at Josh Allen. But I think you'll see the offense a little bit simplified this year in terms of just taking what's given, right?
Yeah.
And just getting the ball in like Dawson Knox's hands. That's one thing I've been even saying since before the even Kincaid pick. I wanted to see Dawson Knox involved more, because as we've seen, when the ball's in his hands, he can run anybody over. He can really get the ball move, or get the chains moving. So I think you'll see a different offense than usual.
Yeah. It's funny you bring up, first off, Knox's usage down the stretch, because one thing that I was suspicious of was he had his injury during the year, and it was, I believe, a hamstring injury. So that's a, grueling injury to come back from, only because with how often you're using it and for his position where he's constantly on it, constantly cutting, constantly running, it's going to be a nagging injury that takes time to truly come back from, which makes me believe that he wasn't 100% during the year. And towards the end of the season, you were seeing him get more involved and also be more productive. So I think it's weird, because I would have to go back and really look into it. But Knox's usage, I think, had more to do with the injury than it did Dorsey, but I'm not going to absolve Dorsey of blame on that as well. I think you could see Knox get more involved next year and see him. He could have been more involved this past year. But that brings up a good point too, because the offense early on in the season, right? We watched it. We saw kind of how they were attacking every side of the field, and you had healthy Allen, and they were taking the layups, which is something that I've been banging the drum for since Allen got drafted, right? Back in 2019 when they got Beasley and they got Brown. I was saying, keep it easy. Just give him something that's short. Try to get someone who can work the middle a little bit to give him like 5 yards on his first down. Or, build up the O-line so that there's better run blocking so that you can hand the ball off and not have to make Allen worry as much. They seem to have that formula going for the first half of the season. But then a lot of people turn to the Green Bay game as that turning point where it was like, wow, what happened? You know what I mean? It feels like they just completely shifted their identity and they just are going for home run or bust every time. And I don't think it was always home run or bust. You can watch certain games and you can see that they were really trying to work it and make it more like intermediate parts of the field involved in their offense. But also, Allen's elbow was a huge problem, and it affected his short range accuracy greatly. So that's a big part of the issues and the drop off in the production in that part of the field. It was funny enough, I forgot where I heard this, so forgive me, but apparently just Allen throwing it deep put less strain on his elbow than it did throwing it shorter, just because the angle that you're throwing at was different. And it somehow made more sense to take bombs down the field than it did to work in middle. And also your accuracy in that range when you're trying to work with an elbow injury is going to suffer. So there were a multitude of reasons for that kind of shift in the offense. But you're right. I'm excited to see it kind of change this upcoming year. I think you draft Kincaid because it's going to work into the 2 tight end set approach that we wanted to see them do. You have this guy who now can be your extra tight end and create these mismatches, or have him line up as your slot receiver and work the middle of the field. It could change the way defenses scheme for you too, because now instead of running this 2 high look all the time, if you have a guy that's now going to be on the short to intermediate part of the field and they have to respect it and come up, now all of a sudden the box is loaded and they're feasting. Those deep threats are feasting to go up. So it's an exciting pick for me. Like I said, I didn't get it at first, but it grew on me. I had some time to think about it. After the pick, I took the dog for a walk. I came back inside. I was a changed man. It was a new world. I was optimistic. So Dalton Kincaid, I'm a fan. You had to say something, Ben?
Yeah, I actually wanted to point out, towards the end of the year, like you said, Knox was getting involved. I mean, we finished the year regular season with four straight touchdowns in the last 4 games. But also, I wanted to point out that because we got Damian Harris now, we got a true bigger back that kind of can be ground and pound type guy. And I think that will also help open the field up, and that's why, like I said, you're going to see a shift in this offense. Not a major one. I don't think it will be like, oh, all of a sudden we're only throwing short passes, because obviously we have a guy in Josh Allen who has a rocket arm. But you'll see when they bring him up in the box, Harris, you'll see a lot more play action, I think. Get Allen on the move, which, I mean, a lot of people say that's when he's at his best, right? When he's outside the pocket making those plays. So I think you'll see a little bit of a change in philosophy, and especially due to Harris coming, now Kincaid coming, I think you're seeing different types of pickups from the Bills that you haven't seen normally in the past.
Agreed. And I just want to address this comment because Roy was saying Kincaid will never have the shake and bake cuts Beasley had in the slot. I don't get the comparison. As I said before, I don't think he's Beasley, right? Beasley was his own very, very talented slot receiver. They work in different ways, but he is able to get himself open. He has the footwork to get himself open. He is going to be that middle of the field option. Just because he's lining up in the slot, just because you're going to have that emergency valve target for Allen doesn't mean he's Beasley. It means he works in his own way. And maybe they're going to find ways to scheme him open in that regard. So just wanted to address that real quick as we move on to our next pick. This one, for positional value for where it was in the draft, I was stunned that he even fell this far. I was stunned that they took him because when we were talking about who the Bills like as offensive linemen and the Cromer type, quote unquote, you don't think of this guy just because he doesn't really fit that mold. And it's not to say he wasn't good. It's to say that Cromer looks for athletic freaks. Like, that's his bread and butter. It's big dudes who can move quickly, who are just like, their RAS score is nuts. But Osiris Torrance was not really someone we thought was on their radar for those reasons. And, when I made my notes for him for the show, all I put down to start it was large human at 6'4", 330 pounds, which, yeah, I mean, absolutely. He was the top-ranked guard in the draft, according to PFF. There were concerns about his mobility and matchup with speed rushers, but again, you don't know how that'll translate to the NFL, good or bad. We'll have to see. Did 697 snaps in 2022. His pass blocking grade per PFF, 76.1. Run blocking grade per PFF, 89.9. So that was something that jumped out to me. Now, again, for the limited I've watched of Osiris Torrance, it isn't much on film, but I've read a lot about him, and I've heard about how his run blocking is stellar. I've also heard they didn't allow a sack in college, but again, there's a multitude of reasons why that could be, so I didn't want to really highlight it. But Ben, talk to me. What do you think about this pick?
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy that, especially in February and March, you saw mocked to the Bills a lot in the first round, not the second, the first round, right? At 27, a lot of people saying Torrance is going to be the guy. A lot of people still thought he would be a first round pick this year, but no, he falls the second, and he falls a lot farther than people think, and now he's a Bill. But I've watched a good amount of him, not too much, but yeah, I mean, it's the pass protection that's going to have to improve a little bit, a little more fluid in that sense. And like you said, he didn't allow a single sack in college, partly due to Florida's offense being a run heavy offense and not really too much of a big passing offense. But yeah, I mean, he's a big guy. He can maul some guys over, right? He can be a guy in the run game that just opens everything up. I love it. I mean, it's when you're talking about value picks, the Bills nailed it in the first 2 rounds, right? You get a guy, Kincaid was to a lot of people a top 15 prospect in this draft, and now you get a guy who to a lot of people were at least a top 40 prospect, and now you get him at 59. Unbelievable value, and it's going to create a little bit of a fun training camp in over at St. John Fisher for Ryan Bates too, seeing what goes on there. And it opens up a lot of options, I think, even next year, right? With Mitch Morse, he's going to be older next year. He's had his concussion problems. I believe he's had 6 concussions since entering the NFL, not even college or high school, just since entering the NFL. He's had 6 concussions. So who knows if he retires, if the Bills end up just moving on next year. Obviously, he's a great center, but like I said, he's getting older. Maybe they decide, okay, Ryan Bates, you're going to be the center next year. Torrance is going to be right guard. And this comment actually is the perfect comment.
All caps, yeah. I love it.
We did see, obviously, Torrance was saying that him and Beane and McDermott, they were all talking about how he can move around. I don't think they'll move him around. I think he'll be a guard. That's it. I don't think they'll try to do a Cody Ford with him. But yeah, I mean, I love the pick. I think it's something that you needed to address at least some point in the draft. And it's 59. You had a lot of options, and the fact that they went Torrance just shows you that they really were thinking about protecting Allen, right? The first 2 rounds, get Allen some help. You get a target. Now you get a big guy to up front to help him out. So I love the pick. I think he could be a day one starter. I could also see them, like in Bill's fashion, just easing him in, saying, we're going to let Bates go. If he struggles, then you'll go in. But I love it.
Yeah, this is the pick I've seen them. I see both sides of the coin, right? I see him being an immediate plug and play that beats out Bates in camp because he's just so good, so big, just able to really shore up that side of the line. And I also see him being a project, someone that has this insane upside, but you really aren't sure if he's ready to go. Maybe he needs to improve his footing. Maybe he needs to work on dealing with speed rushers. It's really interesting that you brought up Ryan Bates because this is where I wanted the conversation to go because I didn't think they were going to take the flyer on Torrance, right? When they got McGovern, and they also backed him up with Edwards. To me, that was, okay, this is our guard addressing. We only have limited resources in free agency. Let's try to shore up the line as best as we can so it's not a position of need in the draft. Then we'll focus on tackle. Again, I think the board falling the way it did affected this pick too because Bergeron went to Atlanta. You saw some of the prize tackles go really early on with Johnson, Skowronski, Darnell Wright going at 10, which mock drafts would have had you thinking he was going to fall to the second round. Obviously, GMs alike did not think that, or at least the Bears GM didn't. It was interesting to see that these tackles go, so how are you going to attack it? So I'm thinking, all right, maybe they'll take the flyer, and they very well still could do this on Saldiveri in the 4th round. We'll see that today. But I did not think Torrance was on the radar. I thought guard was shored up. I thought you had Bakker coming off of his injury. You had Bates taking that side of the line. You have McGovern and Edwards backing them up. But then they take Osiris Torrance. And I realized, okay, they're not that confident, at least in my eyes, that this guard position is as set as we think it is. Now, on McGovern's side of the ball, I think that's fine. I think you have the depth there. But Bakker's coming off an Achilles injury. You don't know how he's going to do. Obviously, that's a massive injury to work your way back from, especially when you're planning on your feet constantly. And you talk about Ryan Bates. Ryan Bates is good, but he's not an elite guard. So now you bring in Torrance. What I think Torrance can do, assuming he plays to his upside, is he takes that starting role from Bates. But now Bates is your Swiss Army O-lineman, right? You're not just talking about him being a guard that can play on both sides of the line, but also as a backup center for Morris, which Bates does pretty well at center when he fills in, right? He's not the worst, he's not the best, but he does his job. He can do it fairly well, and he does have that rapport with Allen that he's been there for a couple of years. So if you have Torrance take that starting spot, all of a sudden Ryan Bates becomes the guy that you can move around on the line. Oh no, McGovern went down. Okay, we don't want Edwards to go there. We feel like Bates could be the immediate improvement. Oh no, McGovern and Edwards went down. Great, Ryan Bates is there. He can hop in. Torrance goes down. Obviously, Bates, same thing. Torrance needs to come out for a play. Bates, same thing. Mitch Morse, unfortunately, goes down with some sort of injury, which I hate to say it, but every season seems to be the case, at least for one game. Then great, Bates comes in. He fills the center role. It opens up a world of possibility for Ryan Bates to move around. So, I saw some people say, why would we take Torrance when Bates has that spot? Bates is a very versatile O-lineman. He goes on all sides. I don't know if I would want him filling in at tackle, but maybe. The option is there. You could play around with that. So for me, taking Torrance at the spot you took him in for the upside you're getting with him, for the projections that he has, was a win pick, an A+ in my book. Because, again, while I would prefer to take a tackle, there wasn't really a great tackle option there to begin with. So why not take this guy? He fell into your lap. I feel like you can't pass up on it. It opens up a world of possibilities. And again, when we talk about running, when we talk about our inability to run, how our interior O-line kind of got gashed in the run game a bit, it's nice to know that we just drafted someone with a really good run blocking grade, right? Someone who's just so big that we can probably get him to move down the field and probably open up some space at front for Cook, Harris, if you want to get Hines and try to run some speed. Maybe an eventual, day 3 pick running back, we'll see. But I love the pick. I'm very, very big fan of it. And I'm just hoping that, if he doesn't start right away, that the discourse is a little more favorable, that we understand that he might need time to develop. We're in the playbook. So, any other thoughts on this, Ben?
Yeah, I think you could also see with either Bates or if Torrance doesn't start right away. We've seen last year they brought out, a 6th offensive lineman for the run game. You saw who was the one that was always coming out? I'm blanking on who it was. The offensive lineman that was always coming out, the 6th offensive lineman. I'm blanking on who it is.
This past season?
Yeah.
Bobby Hart?
Yes, Bobby Hart. Yes, I was blanking on that. But yeah, Bobby Hart, you saw him come out a lot. I think now you could see either if Torrance is starting, Bates fill that role, or if Bates starts right away, you could see them saying, okay, Torrance, let's, get you out there. You're a big guy. Let's get you moving, get you practicing, moving out there and really helping the run game. So I think that's just one last thing that I wanted to point out. I think you'll see is just that sixth offensive lineman coming out. I think you could see one of those two end up filling that role.
Yeah, and again, I remember a few weekends ago, and this has been something that we've joked around about, but it's also something viable, was if they took the right tackle and they had Spencer Brown, who was an athletic monster, mind you, lose that starting spot, there's a way to do kind of the same thing with him, right? We were making a joke that we had people in the chat call it a different name. I came up with Swiss Army roll. Someone called it the ogre back, which was like a sick name for it. Just basically some sort of hybrid, like tackle, tight end, fullback. And this is something that would have been cool to see. But in a weird way, you kind of can get that same concept of Ryan Bates again. Like, you want to call him Swiss Army roll because he moves all around the line? Sure. But yeah, it's interesting because Bobby Hart really filled in a really niche role. And I'm wondering if later on in the draft, if you're talking about maybe Spencer Brown in this case, if they did find that tackle and he did beat him out, would you actually be willing to do that with him? And I think you could be. So I'm a lot more optimistic about the offensive line this year. I'm optimistic for not only protecting Allen, but now introducing Torrance. You're getting someone who, again, specializes in run blocking, and Spencer Brown's bread and butter is run blocking as well. Like, he hasn't been the best in pass protection, but he's been pretty good in run blocking. So having two people that can line up on the same side of the line and kind of improve that altogether might make for a much more effective run game, which I didn't even think, despite people saying it was that ineffective this past season. I mean, it was the best under the McDermott era. They're a pass-heavy offense, so it's obviously not going to trump some of the better rushing offenses in the league. And you look at James Cook's stats, and he averaged the second most yards per carry in the NFL. So it's not to say that the talent isn't there and that they couldn't make something work with it. It's to say that, hey, we just got a lot better at it, at least projected-wise. Let's do some damage now that we have a power back behind James Cook and Damian Harris, who has proven to be a thorn in our side when we played him, and now we can do that to other teams as well. Ben, we're moving on to the 3rd round pick. This chat is elated that I'm going to bring this up. But before we do, everyone, I want to thank you again all so much for tuning in. If you are late to the party, please like this video. It helps get it in front of all of your beautiful YouTube algorithms so you can tune in and roast my takes or praise my takes, whatever you feel like doing. I am happy to hear both sides. And again, stick with us for the end of the show because I'll show you this week's comment of the week. Every week I do a comment of the week where if you say something funny or something I agree with, I will post it here on the show and give you a shout out. You don't get any money or anything, but you get like kind of a moral pat on the back. I guess that's something, right, Ben? Yeah. Can't be too mad at like a consolation prize. So, All right, chat. I know you guys are excited for this. Let's talk about the polarizing picture of Dorian Williams. I hope if Chris Kapner's in this chat, I know you read. I hope you like that reference. Or if you've read that book before, I hope you like that reference because I was proud of that. Dorian Williams, known for a speedy physical linebacker, sideline to sideline speed, and does have coverage skills, but slightly undersized if you were going to play him at the Mike role. He's 6'1" and 228 pounds. Obviously, a bit of a drop off from Tremaine Edmonds. Now, a lot of people speculated that, and people have talked about he would be better in like a Milano type role. Like, obviously another one of those like weak side linebacker types where, yeah, he's got the speed, he's got the juice, he's got obviously a lot of athleticism, but he isn't the Mike size, right? And that's kind of the question mark that surrounds this pick because I understand why they did it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I didn't see it coming. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was a shock. Taking a linebacker was something that we all thought they were probably going to do. Then the Detroit Lions sipped on a Red Bull, did some Adderall, and said, hey, let's take Jack Campbell at pick number 18. So naturally, that option gets gone. And then Trenton Simpson goes literally 2 picks before you. And then Overshow goes a pick before you. So obviously, the board completely messed this whole thing up. I think they were just making do with what they had. I'm sure that they had tabs on Williams being a productive linebacker at Tulane. Obviously, he had a pretty good year. he's a very, at least for his size, good tackler. But again, he's not a traditional Mike. So, Ben, what are your thoughts on Dorian Williams, and how do you think he could be used on this defense?
Well, I actually loved him coming into the draft. I did have a 4th-round grade on him, so around early, but I didn't hate it. I like I said, it was a little bit early, but he flies around the field, man. Like he's a guy that if he plays a lot, you'll see him flying everywhere, right? He can do everything in coverage. He can get after the quarterback. He had 5 sacks this past year. So I liked him a lot. Like you said, though, he is a little bit undersized. But I do want to point out Sean McDermott, when he was the defensive coordinator over at Carolina, when they went 15-1, went to the Super Bowl, they had 2 linebackers that were 6 feet. And then they had Luke Kuechly, who was 6'3", right? So they didn't have too much size at linebacker there, and a lot of it was they wanted with the arm length, right? They wanted that wingspan to be big, and that's what you're getting essentially with a lot of these linebackers that you're seeing on the roster right now. And funny enough, the 4th linebacker in Carolina that year was AJ Klein. Now he's here in Buffalo, so just a little funny thing there. But I think you'll see a little bit of a different play calling this year with McDermott, and I think you saw that with even the free agents they went after, right? You saw with Taylor Rapp coming in with now as another safety. You got a lot of secondary there that you can play. I mean, a lot of people want to see Benford again. They want to see Elam. You got Teron Johnson, who's one of the better tacklers on the team. I think you could see him a lot on the field. So I think you can see a defense that is kind of one of those positionless defenses. Said it a lot before the draft. Yeah. And that was a reason why I even thought Brian Branch could be a possible option for the Bills, because I think they could have gotten him and moved him around and said, we're just going to have athletes that just fly across the field and make plays, right? They're going to dare them to run the ball and say, we trust our guys up front. And just, if you want to run the ball 30 times a game, we still think we can beat you. But when it comes to Dorian Williams, I don't know how much you'll see this year. I think Beane said it in the press right after they picked him that they're going to have him start at outside linebacker at least to start his career and just see what he's got, because they're going to want to put some more get him a little bit bigger, add some strength to him. But I like the pick. I don't love it. I like it. I think and I think a lot of I get why a lot of fans are a little bit hesitant to say, it's another 3rd-round linebacker. I don't like the pick, but at the end of the day, I think they have a plan with these linebackers, and I think that they have a plan on the defense now with McDermott being the guy that's going to be calling plays, going to be the head guy there instead of Frazier. So it's definitely a pick. I see why people are a little bit hesitant to say they like it, but at the end of the day, he brings some great traits to this team. He flies around the field, and he can cover. He can do a little bit of everything, but we'll see what they have planned for him.
One thing I saw when I was reading about him. So again, when I was looking at linebackers, I was really looking, it's a top heavy class, and then it kind of goes downhill. So for me, I was really looking into the Drew Sanders. I was looking into the Trenton Simpson, looking into Jack Campbell, maybe even Overshown. But Dorian Williams was the one where I was like, I saw it, like, oh, now I gotta do more, because I honestly didn't think they were going to do it. I figured if the top LBs were gone, they were just going to roll with what they had, and then they took it. But one thing I did read up on about him is that he is able to keep up with the tight ends, and that's something that's important in this defense, and that's something that Milano typically does. But it's another, I guess you could call it depth piece if you wanted to do so. But I'm glad you brought up McDermott, his time in Carolina, and the fact that he's inheriting the defense, because this is probably one of the bigger question marks in the offseason as we venture into 23 was, how's this defense going to look on week 1 with McDermott at the helm? Is it going to be more of that traditional, we run nickel most of the time and we really don't come out of it too often? We trust our guys. We trust the checks they have. We trust our coverage and our disguising coverage, and then we kind of just rock with that. Or are we going to see it kind of transition to something a little bit new? Not a total overhaul of scheme change. That can't happen. We're just going to obviously keep that intact, but different, something where you can kind of run into a different type of base every now and then, maybe run a little more 4-3, maybe just have some new looks where you have different blitz packages and be a little bit more aggressive. As you said, McDermott is a bit more aggressive. So I could absolutely see Williams playing into that, where maybe they don't want to have that Edmonds type that does so much in the middle of the field, but rather delegate some of that coverage responsibility more to the back end with someone like Taylor Rapp and maybe Taron Johnson. And then these linebackers are more up top, more used for the pass rush, more loaded up in the box and just playing for the run or playing for the short side of the field, which if you're going to do that, excuse me, that was a voice crack. Oh my goodness. I'm 26. I still have a voice crack. But Dorian Williams could absolutely make that work. I mean, again, it's nothing to say that he doesn't have the motor or that he's not a good tackler or that he's not someone who could get to the other side of the field and make a play on someone running. It's more to say, like, there's concerns about his size. There's concerns about how he sheds blocks if he's able to do that at a high level. But if you're putting him in positions where he's just with the D-line and the D-line, you know, if they're healthy, is causing penetration and he's cleaning it up, whether by moving up front or staying back and just not having to deal with as much if a running back gets through or if a quarterback's under pressure and, you know, he's there to make the play, then it could work out. And maybe you could run something in your defense where maybe, yes, they're a bit undersized and you don't have that conventional Mike. But like you said, the magic word, positionless defense. Not all linebackers are built the same. Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano are not the same person, even though they're listed at linebacker on their position. Edmonds was a big physical freak who covered the middle of the field and had speed that coaches admired and would have killed to have. Matt Milano is more of a weak side guy. He's very aggressive, but you would never have him play Mike. I just don't think he'd be as good at it. He really specializes in the role he has. So with Dorian Williams, I mean, if you're running him with Milano and you change things up and not asking him to necessarily be Tremaine Edmonds, but be Dorian Williams, let's tailor this defense and your role to your strengths. Let's try to make it so that rather than having you move so far back in the field in coverage, we can maybe have Taylor Rapp take that slack off of you, which is why I think they signed him and maybe indicative of this type of situation happening where they might not be able to get their next Edmonds right away. Or maybe you run it back again and AJ Klein takes Edmonds' role straight up and you just have these guys as depth to take some slack off of Klein. Regardless, I do understand the discourse on Dorian Williams being semi-negative just because it feels like we struck out and we took the linebacker that we could. But I also could see the potential for him in this defense. And again, when you have McDermott and knowing that he's an aggressive coach, knowing that he's someone that, again, built a defense in Carolina that was one of the best in the league. And even though they lost that Super Bowl, we're still pretty solid in there with the corpse of Peyton Manning not really able to do much. I can see the potential for it. I'm not going to call it an F. I'm not going to call it a C. I'm not going to call it an A. Let's call it like a B- in my book. It's a wait and see. If it works out, I'll be happy. But like, if it doesn't, I'll kind of just be like, whatever, man. Like, you tried, it didn't work. Let's try the next draft. So, any other thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say he, like I said, with the wingspan, he's got a 6'8" wingspan, by the way. He's 6'1" or 6 foot, but he's got a 6'8" wingspan, and he runs he ran a 4.49. So he can fly, right? That's his major thing. He allowed 161 yards in coverage on 367 coverage snaps this past year. So I think you'll see with Dorian Williams, yeah, you might not see him play a lot right away, just the same way with a lot of the linebackers you've seen lately that we've drafted. But I do, like you said, yeah, it's about a B-. I could see maybe C+ type of thing. But I don't hate the pick. You're going to see a little bit of a different defense, like you said, and you could see maybe even Poyer come up into the box every once in a while, right? Because he was another great tackler for this team. But I think the main guy that you'll see, and I saw some people saying in the past on Twitter and everything to trade this guy, but Teron Johnson, right? He's been a very good player for us, but he's one of the best tacklers, if not the best tackler on this defense. He's been consistent with it. So I think you could even see him move into the box occasionally. But I think you'll see them basically say, like I said, they're going to dare teams to run the ball. They're just going to say, come at us. You're not going to be able to throw the ball. That's for sure. If you want to try to run the ball, we're going to be waiting for you. And like you said, no matter who it is that they're going to have at linebacker, just saying, all right, you're focused on the run. Everybody else is focused on the pass. It's going to be I think you'll see a little bit of a transition, a struggle transitioning in the first week or two, but it's going to be a little bit of a question mark to see which direction they go. Just because, like you said, it's a different feel with the McDermott defense right now and with the personnel that they're bringing in. And I think you'll see a lot of AJ Klein this year. I mean, I think he filled in pretty well the past few years whenever he's played. So it's going to be it's going to be a questionable, or not questionable. It's going to be a transition phase with this defense. You're not going to see the same defense, I think, as you saw last year, but like you also said, it's not going to be a complete overhaul. It's not going to be completely different schemes, completely different coverage styles, everything. But I think you'll see a little bit of a different thing. You'll see just guys flying around the field, and that's one thing at least I love. I just love seeing guys fly across the field and just making plays. And I think that was the one thing only thing I think people got a little upset with Tremaine is sometimes he took that extra half second just to really go. But I mean, now that he's gone, somebody's got to fill that hole at the mic, right? So we'll see who ends up taking it.
Speaking of hole at the mic, Ben, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, yes, I apologize, everybody. I don't know if some of you who noticed this issue were here at the top of the program, but the mic I normally use is a Blue Yeti microphone. And for some reason, when I pulled the Blue Yeti out to use it for the show on Thursday, the wire snapped. So I am running off what was formerly my iPhone mic. It cut out. We are moving on to the laptop mic. There's a lot more reverb on my voice, I'm sure. So I do apologize for that technical difficulty while I was speaking. But Ben, I agree with that. I am a huge supporter of it just becoming a more aggressive and seeing people fly over the field. Again, I saw someone bring up Taron Johnson in the comments. Taron Johnson, I think one of the things that offenses started figuring out last season was how to kind of match up on him, where if the team's going to stay in the nickel, we'll run the ball on you, and then we're going to have a physical running back one-on-one with Taron Johnson and just mow him over and then move past him. I think now what you could also do is maybe figure out some way to scheme it so that Dorian Williams is on the field at the same time, and now Johnson can drop back into coverage, and Williams is your guy who kind of comes up and just is an additional help. Not drops back into coverage, but Williams is the additional guy that can come up and kind of make the stops on those running backs. I think the potential for this defense to still be a good unit is there. You're talking about McDermott. You're talking about his aggressive nature. I think you're going to see them start running more blitzing, especially, maybe take some of the pass rush capabilities of Bernard, who I know he specialized in that. Obviously, Milano's as good at getting through a gap as anybody. And then, of course, your front four may be able to hold over the gap if you don't take edge and you need time for Von Miller to come back to supplement it with some new blitz looks. So we'll wait and see on this one. I know that it's kind of a question mark with the linebacker pick. I know we've done it back-to-back years. I'm going to go easy on him and see how he does. And if it doesn't pan out, I mean, listen, man, I was one of those people that wanted Edmonds to come back. Absolutely. He didn't. He's gone. We have to work around it. AJ Klein being there gives me a little more comfort because even though he's not nearly as athletic or talented as Edmonds was, he's still serviceable enough where I think you could plug him in as the starter if you wanted to just run a familiar concept and then work from there and see how you develop as the season goes on. So those were our picks so far, Ben. It's certainly been an interesting draft, but I want to ask you now as we move on to the back end of the show, we're on day 3. We have our, remaining picks. I think we have, because we've already picked us. So we have 2 more because we traded one up for Dalton Kincaid. So unless they trade back, unless they trade a player, and we're rocking with 2 picks, I'm very curious to see how Beane maneuvers around the board today. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it stays put with the 2 picks, or do you think Beane really does work it out where he can move back a little bit, maybe get one more for the later rounds? What do you think?
I think it will depend a lot on how the board falls, especially in that early 5th round pick that they have, because I think they will want to address interior defensive line, right? I think they'll want to get somebody like maybe Jacqueline Roy. Coburn's obviously still there, and Ojomo's still there. But there's still a lot of great players available. If somebody ends up falling a little bit, maybe you see Beane get, antsy and trade up. But if Roy, Ojomo, Coburn aren't there, like you said, I could see them easily trading back. There was talk that in a report that came out that the Bills were thinking about trading back from 91. They had offers there, decided to stay, take Williams. Now it's a little bit of a question mark. Is this somebody going to call Beane and say, hey, we really want pick 130. There's a guy that's fallen. We'll give you 2 picks in the mid to late-ish 170s, 180s, and Beane might say, yeah, let's do it. Let's give me 2 more picks. We'll have 3 picks instead. But is a 6th round pick and is 2 6th round picks or a 5th and a 6th as valuable as the pick that they have right now? It's only time will tell with how the board falls. But there's plenty of great guys still available. I mean, obviously the one guy that I think a lot of people also wanted at 91, DeJuan Jones, he's still there. don't know how far he'll fall. I mean, I'd imagine that he'd get picked somewhat soon. But there's a lot of guys still that I think that the Bills could make a move for. I don't know what position they're really looking at. I mean, a guy I also love is A.T. Perry from Wake Forest. He's he does have occasional drop issues, but he's a guy that, he's bigger. He can line up outside. He can be a guy that, say, if Gabe Davis wants a lot of money next year, could maybe take over that role. I actually ended up having him in my final Bills mock, going to them in the 5th round. But there's a lot of guys that I like still. I'd be interested to see what position they go, whether it's offensive line, defensive line, maybe another linebacker. I'd be shocked if there was another linebacker, but there's a lot of positions that they could go.
Please don't. For the sake of everyone's mental health and this chat, please do not make it be another linebacker. I think you'd hear Western New York explode if that were to happen. I'm sorry to cut you off. That was
Yeah, I would doubt it. I would highly doubt it. But Beane can be a madman sometimes, right? He can be a madman. But I mean, there's another guy. I mean, Andrew Voorhees. I know he's gonna fall a little bit because of his torn ACL at the combine, but he's another guy. Maybe they go guard again. Maybe they go offensive line again. But we'll see what they go. I mean, I think they'll end up probably going defensive line if they really would want. They want to stay there at 137. There's a lot of guys that I like there. Wide receiver wise, I think there's a few. I would say A.T. Perry, Kayshon Boutte. I know a lot of people are that. Yeah, I like I said, I highly doubt that they go linebacker. I highly doubt it. But, I mean, you've seen Beane go crazy on a couple positions sometimes in the past. But when it comes to receivers, I'm a big fan of A.T. Perry and even Kayshon Boutte. I know a lot of people are hesitant because of his off the field issues and everything, but he's a good player. He's a good player if they believe that he has the right mindset now going in the NFL. I mean, culture can change a lot, can change a player a lot, right? He can come in and all of a sudden think, oh, I really, I'm going to get down to it. I got Diggs that can teach me, mentor me. I have a lot of guys there that can mentor you, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. Parker Washington's still there. Xavier Hutchinson's a guy I like.
Yeah. I forgot about both of them. They are still there.
Raheem Jarrett, even late. I mean, I know that would probably be more of like the 7th round, maybe 6th round. But a lot of guys still there I like. I would imagine, though, I think D-line would be the pick.
I agree completely. D-line, O-line are probably still my big two. I think DeJuan Jones falling was interesting, but I kind of get it. Questions about his athleticism. I think if I recall correctly, he didn't even test at his pro day. If I don't have a mistake, there was something along those lines. But either way, with him falling, I mean, I would take the flyer if I had to. I really like the idea of taking Saldiveri as well. That's probably my favorite target right now. I think it's never too late to introduce some competition at right tackle. I know that we just re-signed Quessenberry, but I think I would rather Quessenberry be that let's just plug him in if someone goes down type tackle. I don't want him to be legitimate competition for Brown. I would like to take the flyer on a young guy with high upside. Saldiveri seems to be that for me. That would be probably my only choice if DeJuan Jones goes as well. Probably those two. I can't really think of anyone else that really wows me at that position. But yeah, you're right. D tackle seems to be a need. We have none for next year. Now, granted, that is a next year problem, but I know Brandon Beane likes to get ahead and kind of play the future board a little bit. And that's where I can see them going for a Coburn, Ojimo, or maybe going, if they want to go edge rusher again and maybe take Isaiah McGuire, who I really like. I think he'd be really good, and that'd be some late round value. Broderick Martin's another option for the later rounds that I'd like. There's a few players out there that I'm still a big fan of. When you go receiver, even though you have Kincaid added to the mix, and I know that he's going to fill the slot role, you're right about Davis. There's a question mark. Like, is he going to be here next year? We're entering the final year of Gabe Davis. Obviously, that vertical role, there's been a lot of, question marks about, what his future will be. Now, again, I've been a big Gabe Davis defender. I would love to see him come back. I'd love to see them try to work something out with him. I don't know if they will, so we'll just have to see with it. But I think if you're looking for a replacement for him, there are some options out there. Again, you mentioned A.T. Perry. I know Andre Iosivas is another one. Again, you said Hutchinson, Washington, Bell. There's other receivers out there that could kind of plug in or at least be deft to start, and you kind of see how they go. Again, receivers in a draft, while there are great ones every single year, you're always going to be able to find someone that could potentially fill that role, especially if you have Dorsey who makes that leap forward and comes up with some better, more creative options for his wide receiver too. And if Davis decides to walk away, then you have a rookie who can fill that role. I think there is still potential options there. I wouldn't be surprised if they took another receiver. I don't think Kincaid was the final solution. I do think it takes, a little bit of pressure off of trying to find the receiver now. I don't think they have to scurry for it, but I also think that it's something that they have the luxury of doing or not. I think that you have the possibility of maybe taking some safety depth as well. I know people don't really want to do that, but got to remember, I mean, Poyer is a dog, but Poyer's on the backside of 30. He signed a 2-year contract. He had a bad elbow injury last year that really seemed to linger with him. Lateral meniscus tear, still played through it. He's an absolute dog, nothing but respect for Poyer, but you have to acknowledge those injuries at his age at this point in his career. Micah Hyde with the fusion surgery, again, he's a clock ticking down on the last year of his deal. You don't know if he's going to be healthy. You don't know if he's going to rebound from it or not. And again, I love Poyer and Hyde. I hope they stick around. This isn't me saying like, they're done, they're washed. Absolutely not. They're still one of the best safety tandems in the league, but they got to stay on the field. Will they is a question mark. I think it's a valid thing to talk about. So if they were to and try to take someone like Beane in the later round, in the 6th round, or maybe you go for Hill from Pitt, which I know Aaron Quinn loves, so I had to plug him. I'll plug him any chance I get. That's another option. If you want to add, we're entering the weeds, the later rounds of the draft. Don't be surprised if they try to just take depth at this point to see if they can come in and compete. Maybe they go cornerback because they think Benford is going to be an eventual safety and they want to transition him over and take him. Again, I'm not saying they're going to do any of these things, but they're possibilities. Brandon Beane has surprised us before, but I think if I had to pick what's the likeliest as far as what they would try to fill in now, it's probably D-line. It's probably defensive tackle. Ben, I'm not sure because after the Bills pick, I had to get to Megs. I had to get up early this morning. Did Siaki Ika get taken?
Yes, he got taken 98th by Cleveland.
Oh, man. I love Siaki Ika. That hurts. And Cleveland's going to have an absolutely stacked defensive line. I'm actually happy Bills News just chimed in with this because there's some prospects that we could also talk about. I forgot about Tyler Scott. Thank you for bringing up Tyler Scott. I'm actually surprised he fell. That's a good deep threat. I think we just said Ika got taken, but yeah, Luke Whippler's still there. And again, that's another position I wanted to talk about. Thank you for jogging my memory on this because we're talking about center. Again, Bates could be your backup center. If they don't take one, I won't be surprised. I think their plan will just be to have Bates come in and back him up. But you got to remember, again, Morris is one concussion away from potentially being done. Like, I think you have to have the conversation of who's going to be his replacement. Do you want Bates to do that? Was this Torrance move potentially filling in the void of Morse because Bates goes over there and now you don't have a drop off in guard, assuming Torrance plays well? Like, that's the question I have. And if I see them take a center, I think that's going to tell me that they're going to just try to keep Bates at that kind of versatile role and have Morse's replacement lined up. I'm honestly shocked that Juice Scruggs went as early as he did. I really am, because I saw every single mock draft I did, he was dropping down to like the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and now all of a sudden he just got taken in the end of the 2nd or the beginning of the 3rd, something like that. So that was crazy. But I think that if you see them go for a Whippler, that could tell you a lot. Or the kid from Michigan, I'm blanking on his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would mess up. Me personally, I'd probably mess up the pronunciation for it, but
yeah. I definitely am not opposed to taking center. I think it's a sneaky potential position to need that if you want to just avoid having the headache of taking it for the future and just use it now, and maybe it works out, it doesn't work out, obviously it's a whole different story. Again, anything I talk about with any prospect, any draft prospect, is not with certainty. Of course, I know how they'll probably want to use them. I'm not saying they're going to pan out. We could be having the same conversation in a year about tight end for all we know. But again, if we're talking about positions of need and what you want them to take, defensive line is one I would take. Center is another one that I could see them taking. Offensive tackle is something I could still see them go with if they like someone on the board. But otherwise, so far, Ben, I mean, it's been an interesting draft. What would you give it? What would be the grade that you'd have to give this draft so far?
I would give it, because it's tough, because if you would have asked me before round 3, it would have been like an A. It would have been an easy A. But how far does that Dorian Williams pick really, how much does it bring it down? To me, it doesn't bring it down too much. I would still say probably like a B+. I really have liked it. I mean, you get two great value picks in the first 2 rounds. And then, you reach a little bit on the third round linebacker, but it was a run. There was a run going on the linebackers. Do I wish we would have traded up to get somebody like Trenton Simpson, who I was huge on? Yeah, loved it. Would have loved it. But so far, Yeah, I'm saying B plus. I get anywhere in the range of a B. If people said A minus, I wouldn't say that's horrible either. But it's been a solid draft so far. You get guys that should be able to come in if you need them, because that's the thing too. Like, our offense was top 3 in the league last year, right? Even if they don't utilize Kincaid a ton right away, the offense should still be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Torrance doesn't start right away, the offensive line should still be decent, right? Williams doesn't need to play right away. I still feel like the defense should be able to do its job. So you get guys that you don't need to rush in, but you can easily put in there, and I would expect to be put in there right away, at least 2 of them. I would expect Torrance to maybe get that starting spot, and obviously Kincaid to be used a lot. So I would say B plus. I like the draft so far. I now just either address defensive line or I would say tackle. I would kind of say, like we talked about a little bit, Weipler. I'm not as big on him as other people are, just because he's a little bit undersized, needs to really add some strength. But like you said, he could be a guy that if they go after him and they get him, sit for a year, learn from Morse, get him a little beefed up. Also, I mean, and the guy that I did want to mention that I really am a big fan of is Carl Brooks from Bowling Green. So he's an option too, I think. But Blake Freeland is also another guy that I think maybe if you trade back, you could end up getting him. So there's a lot of guys there that I think that you could still get. But as of right now, I'd still give it a B plus.
Thank you for reminding me of Carl Brooks and Freeland, and also everyone in the chat saying Roy. That was another one I kept forgetting too. It's their first 2. If we were talking just their first 2 alone, I'd give them an A. I mean, I love Kincaid. I didn't at first. I grew on me. The thoughts of how he would be used grew on me. So I'm a bigger fan of that pick and think there's a lot of upside and potential in this offense for him. Torrance, again, same thing. It caught me by surprise a little bit, but now I see what it could be. And like, that's how I am with every draft pick, but I especially see like, okay, this could absolutely work. If anything, this addresses a need that I didn't even think of. So Torrance, again, that was a good pick. Really great value pick, especially for him dropping down to them at 59. Like I would give those 2 an A, but then Williams is just such a question mark. And I think like if they go for that scheme, not scheme shift, if they go for some new wrinkles in the defense and he fits those well, like Patrick said in the comments, that's obviously like if every pick pans out, you give him an A, right? But like if they were like very clearly using him in a way where we didn't think of, and all of a sudden you're seeing him produce and this defense becomes better as a whole because of it, then yeah, I would be willing to obviously bump my grade up from what I'm about to say. But I think B to B minus is probably the best way to put it. I think you fail a test, but you got 200s, you're going to drag the whole grade down. I don't want to call this a failure. I don't want to speak in absolutes here, but it definitely wasn't my favorite pick that they could have done at 91 for the reason that I feel like you could have at this point just ran with the linebacker room that you had. And like you're taking this kid that is a question mark. You want to hope that he can produce, that he can pan out, but he's really fitting a mold that you already kind of have in your defense with Milano. And like, if he's not the Mike and he doesn't end up developing into the Mike in any way, and there isn't this, wrinkle where you could have 2 semi-undersized linebackers running around like they did in Carolina, then did you just waste that pick? And I'm worried about it because, the discourse on Bernard is already pretty hot with, did we waste a pick on him? Which I don't think we wasted one, because if Bernard, could become something of like a pass rush specialist to aid that if they do some new blitzes or maybe disguises, and then he plays well on special teams, like it's not sexy, but it gets the job done. I won't be mad at it. But if Dorian Williams, who's also a known special teams linebacker, kind of does the same thing he does, then it's like, did you need to do this? So for me, it's a B to B minus range with the potential to go up, assuming that the rest of their draft is kind of a hit. But we're just going to have to see. It's very, very big question marks with the later on, especially. And again, I'm trying to find the comment, but they did move that pick. They moved that 4th round pick. I think it was 130. So Not only did you move your earlier of the 2, but you also gave yourself one less pick for this draft. In a draft where you already had one less, you only had 6. Now you're down to 5. And I think while Kincaid's going to be a great player, I didn't love doing that, right? Like if they had stayed put and then eventually traded back, like I would have understood. And Tennessee, Atlanta was one of the picks. Like if you had moved back to 39, you could be talking about realistically having like 8 picks right now, but you don't. So it's hard for me to truly be like over the moon, but I'm not disappointed by any means. I think though calling it B to B minus is the fairest grade you can give it, and we're just going to have to see how Williams pans out and how the rest of the draft shakes out. So Ben, before we close out and get to our comment of the week, I want to ask you one question. It's a question that I hope we can just finally stop asking. And I think I know what the answer to this question is already, not just from you, but from the world, from the universe. Oh, I'm so tired of these damn question marks. But can we just put this to bed? Do you think D Hop will be a Bill at the end of the day tonight?
I do not. I was one that I will say I did think it was a big possibility before the draft. I thought there's a huge one. But I don't think Arizona's budging on their asking price at least too much. I think they would at least want a third next year. And I don't know how much they would want to cap wise. They would want to eat. You'd have to probably extend them another year, push the money back. And it would pretty much say, okay, Gabe Davis, this is your last year as a Buffalo Bill. Would I be mad if they did it? No, not at all. I would not be mad. I mean, it's DeAndre Hopkins, and I get the concerns about him being a little older, but I will say I think his play style doesn't get affected as much because of he's getting older. Like he's not a Tyreek Hill where his speed's really going to affect his game. Right, he creates separation. He can get open. So I don't know. I think it's a possibility still. I would, if I had to bet on it though, I would say no. I think that he ends up either staying in Arizona or a team like the Giants. I don't think he'll end up in Kansas City or anything like that. And the Ravens are still, they just drafted a receiver, so I don't think he'd end up there. So yeah, I think. I think that he ends up I think he'll stay in Arizona.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a Bill either. And I think the Chiefs taking Rice yesterday kind of felt like they're conceding in that move as well, because I feel like Rice plays a similar game. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a Bill. I don't think he's going to be a Chief. I at this point think he either stays in Arizona and they rework the deal, or some mystery team with a lot of cap space swoops in and says, hey, you didn't get anybody. Let's take him. Sure, let's make this happen. But at this point, like, let that be the case. I'm done. I don't want to focus on it anymore. The smoke was just so much. And listen, like, I was never anti D Hop. We did it in the last mock draft. We did. But at this point, like, I don't think it's going to happen. I think we just don't want to. First off, if Arizona's not eating any of that money, then forget it. I'm not paying him that much money. I think they're going to end up keeping Ed too, the Bills, and I think that's going to be their 10 mil that they eat this year, and then D Hop is just a pipe dream that we can finally put to bed. I agree with that. I did want to ask you one more thing, Ben, because I saw this comment presented earlier, but just taking it out of the Bills and talking about this draft as a whole, who's been your favorite team so far? Like, who has had the best draft in your eyes?
Honestly, there's a couple teams. I think Seattle's one. I've loved what Seattle did. I know people said, "Oh, Witherspoon at 5 was a little bit of a question mark over a guy like Jalen Carter or even Tyree Wilson." But I like what they did. They got the best corner in the draft, in my opinion. They got the best receiver in the draft, and I'm blanking on who they ended up getting in the second and third. But I know it was somebody that I was looked at, and I was like, "Oh, that's another guy that I wish that we got." So I think Seattle's one. The Eagles obviously are another team that, I mean, their future is looking amazing. It really is. It looks unbelievable. They nailed the first 2 rounds, and I just think that they're setting themselves up for a very good future. I still think they have a decent amount of picks, I think, still for the rest of the draft. And the team I'm seeing a lot is getting a lot of hate, especially in the comments, which it's I get it. It's the Lions, but I don't think they've had that bad of a draft, right? They're getting quality players. Yes, they reached on some players like Gibbs. I think they majorly reached on Campbell. I think they majorly reached on, but they're going to be impact players for them. I think that they got Brian Branch at 45. That's another great pick that I love for them. So I think they've had a good draft. I just think that when you look at the value of where they got picked, yeah, that's a little bit of a question mark. But I saw some people say, well, if you move Branch up to 12 and then bump everybody down, it looks a lot better because Branch could have been a 12th overall pick. So I think Detroit, I like them too. But yeah, I there's those are probably the three teams that stand out the most to me, whether it's good or bad of their picks. But yeah, those three teams for me.
I think it's Buffalo, baby. Buffalo all the way. No one better than the Buffalo Bills, baby. I love this. No, I think the Bills, like I said, B to B minus. But so I saw a really great tweet from Brett Coleman last night where he said, I'm just going to pretend that Jahmyr Gibbs and Brian Branch got picked in each other's spots and it'll make way more sense.
Yeah.
And the Lions have just said, I don't care about positional value. I'm taking you because I think we can use you. And dude, they're like it or not, the picks that they have made have been perfect for them. If you don't think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to eat in Ben Johnson's offense, then you're in for a rude awakening, man. I figured that if they were going to take Gibbs, who basically does the same thing Swift does, that Swift is on his way out, and indications are that he's been a trade piece, maybe in this draft, maybe down the road. He's been injured a lot, so I understand why they took Gibbs there. They did do it early, but I loved it. Like, I was like, yeah, man, you didn't have to do this at 12, but also, like, he's going to be nasty in that offense. And the same thing with Campbell. I think Campbell's going to be a plug-and-play starter. He's going to be their linebacker. Like, that was a good pick. It was just a reach. They don't care about positional value. They care about guys that are on their board that they're like, hey, he's there. Let's just grab him. Screw it. Yeah. Balls to the wall. They did. So, you know what? Yes, not the greatest use of positional value. However, they got players that are going to fill roles. Branch was a great pick for them. Just they're doing it in a way that isn't correct, but it's like when you do the wrong problem in a math question, but somehow still get the right answer. That's what it feels like to me with the Detroit Lions. But not my favorite. I think my favorite two are Philly and Seattle. Again, Seattle getting the mixture of Witherspoon and Jackson Smith-Njigba in the first round, dressing both sides of the ball. You already have just, Geno playing at what was debatably an MVP level, Metcalf, Lockett. Now you introduce JSN, who's going to be a beast for them. You already had a pretty solid defense there. And Woolen was emerging, flashy corner, and now you added another piece to go alongside with him. And then you just take a Charbonnet, which a little interesting considering that they already had Walker there, who was doing pretty well, but you wanted to add another running back and put a two-headed monster. I think that was a little bit of a reach, but you know what? Well, at the end of the day, when you play Seattle on a Sunday, that running game is going to be nasty. They're building themselves up to be a bully, maybe even take a run at that division. So I really like Seattle's draft. I like the Lions draft. But Philly, man, just how do they do this every single year? Every single freaking year, Howie. How do you do it? I need to know. Because no team that's that good should have that much fun in the draft. You're supposed to suffer like the rest of us and watch all the picks get taken. But somehow they always end up being in the right place at the right time, taking two Georgia stud linemen. Like, it is absolutely unfair. But you know what? Hats off to them. I got a lot of Philly Eagle fan friends. I'm rooting for them. I think they probably had the best draft so far. But, there's more to be seen, Ben. We got another day ahead of us. We have some more fun draft coverage ahead of us, too, here on Cover One. So for all of you that are joining our chat today, please stick around on our YouTube channel because at 12 o'clock, I'm actually going to be going back live with Kevin and Mike to do some more draft coverage until 2 p.m. But, Ben, we've hit the final, I guess you want to call it, home stretch of our show today. Thank you so much for joining me as a guest. Sorry, I can't talk. Please feel free to plug whatever you got going on in your world and tell the people in our chat where they can find you.
Yeah, so majorly I'm on Twitter. I use a lot. I mean, at Shoot Ben, but I'm part of Built in Buffalo. Been writing for them for a little bit. You can go check my articles out there and their website, builtinbuffalonews.com. Occasionally on Facebook. Again, just Benjamin Shoop. But yeah, you can check out my YouTube, which I'm starting up recently now. Just starting to get it going. I do some NBA, NFL, all different types of sports. But yeah, a lot of times you'll see me on Twitter just talking Bills, Sabres, even basketball too. I mean, I know obviously there's not a team in Buffalo, but yeah, you can check me out at Shoot Ben. You can find there's a link in my description that puts everything up there. All my articles are on one page if you want to check those out. Tweet me your questions. I'll always be answering them. You can debate me. I'm always a big guy to debate. But yeah, so you can check me out there over at Built in Buffalo. Support them too. I mean, I know obviously Cover One and Built in Buffalo do some things. A lot of the guys talk a lot to sports, a lot of Bills and stuff together. So yeah, that's where you can mostly find me. And yeah, so. Yeah, thanks for having me too. I mean, it was a blast here talking Bills with you. Getting ready for day 3.
Yes, sir. And Ben, you're welcome back here anytime. You were great today. Had a great time with you. Again, yeah, the Built-in Buffalo boys are a lot of fun to work with. I was actually on with Josh and Luca on draft night too, and that was really fun, especially just because like I love draft season mainly for the reason that it feels like everyone kind of takes a little bit of the edge off. We're all just trying to kick back, have a good time, and hope our team doesn't make us scratch our heads. But, sometimes they do at the same time. That happens. That's just the nature of the game. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, Ben. Thank you so much. Before we go, I'm just going to share our comment of the week. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you thought I forgot, I did not forget. I could never forget about the community. You guys are wonderful. For all of you joining me today, there were over 100 of you. So thank you so much. Please like this video. Like it because it helps our channel. It gets us more views. We can keep putting out great draft content and future content for you. Not just this show, but all of the amazing people at Cover One who work so hard every day to provide a good content and a good channel to go to for all of you. Please give it a like. Please subscribe to Cover One. Subscribe to the premium where you can join our Slack channel as well. There's so much to offer and some great insight from some great people. So now for our comment of the week, I got to throw the banner up too. How could I not? We're going to go with our last video. And, no one really had any jokes for me. No, we did a final mock draft. So, Ben, a couple weekends ago, we did a mock draft. And the first one, someone said, I wish I was eating the same brownies that you ate. No brownies this week. There was a lot of love on this mock draft. But one of the comments that I saw, just something I agreed with. Just need to help Allen on the offense. We can't always draft defense first and expect different results on the playoffs. Allen is our guy, and he needs help. That was Gustavo Barros. Thank you so much for your comment, Gustavo. I agree with you, and I am happy that the Bills listened to you and took offense with their first 2 picks. Obviously, we're very happy to see that they got some protection for Allen. It's encouraging that your $256 million asset is being protected. I'm certainly happy about that. And also getting him another weapon to go on third downs, first downs, second downs, end of game, wherever you need him. He will potentially be a great resource for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. But for now, as in for the hour, that's it for Under Review. Thank you all so much for joining me again. Ben, thank you so much again for joining me. I really appreciate all of your time. The coverage does not stop, everybody. The draft coverage continues until the end of the draft today, so please stay tuned. We will be going live again in just under an hour, actually, at 12 o'clock. I will be back with Kevin and Mike. But for now, I'd like to say that if you have something going on at 12 o'clock and you cannot tune into our coverage, thank you so much for spending your morning with me and Ben here. We really appreciate your time. You were all great today. Go Bills. I will see you very soon. Under Review will be back next week at noon. Take care. Enjoy your weekends. And go Bills.
Bills.